Despite a decade-long decline in hunger, in recent years, more Americans are facing food insecurity. Of the 44 million Americans struggling to get enough food, more than 1 in 5 are children. I talked to anti-hunger activist Melony Samuels. I spoke to Samuels in Brooklyn, New York at the headquarters of the Campaign Against Hunger. Samuels founded the nonprofit in 2005 and is executive director. The organization serves more than 300,000 people every year. Dr. Samuels, when I was young, I wanted to go into broadcasting, but I always think when I meet people like yourself that people don't at the age of 13 or 14 say, I'm going to be a justice warrior, or I'm going to be, or I'm going to do something about hunger. Or did you? I mean, how did you end up in this line of work?
That's a strange thing. I still don't know how I got there, but I can tell you what happened to me was, it's simple. A neighbor needed food. I was actually, I don't know if you call that a neighbor, I was actually living in New Jersey when I heard that there was a single mother with 4 children. She was disabled in her arm, was not working. She was a migrant, no documentation. Her husband had left her, and she was in a dire need. And I packed a bag of food, my husband and I, and drove over 50 miles to bring her a meal, something in a bag. And that's how it started.
49 million Americans a year turn to food assistance for extra help. That's according to Feeding America, a nationwide network of food pantries, food banks, and local meal programs.
I found out it was not an isolated situation. 1 family to 5 families to 10 families, and now we're serving 14,000 families per week. It was never planned. It was never a career I was looking forward to. As a matter of fact, when the distribution seemed like it was forming into an organization, I actually asked someone to take charge. And I thought they would have, but they didn't. Left me to come here. I worked in Brooklyn, and I would drive into the neighborhood to see what's going on because I was able to get all the food that was needed and everything else. And I would come about 9 o'clock in the morning, and there was a line already. And the food distribution was 4 o'clock on a Friday. So there's these seniors and everyone sitting, waiting and hoping that someone would, waiting for 4 o'clock. And I would come back at 4 o'clock to see if they started, or 5 o'clock after work to see if they started. No one started the distribution. So, of course, I rolled up my sleeve and I got in there. And then I made it a point of duty every Friday that I would roll up my sleeve, get in there, and then I noticed that there was a need for more food. The lines were being wrapped around. Families were coming. I did a survey and found out that in Bed-Stuy, there were quite a few pantries, but it still was not meeting the needs of the residents that were living in poverty. And I received my first grant for $8,000, and I thought, well, here I am. I'll be able to feed all these individuals, but it wasn't so. The need was greater than $8,000. And so now the history is you're looking at the Campaign Against Hunger, an organization with about a $20 million budget, including in-kind contribution, after 26 years.
Wow. I was just, as you were talking, I heard the subway going by, and it reminded me of a story. I used to be on the board of the Capital Area Food Bank, and the leader of the Capital Area Food Bank said that, the problem with hunger is that it's invisible, but it's also ever present. Like, yes, most of us don't see it, but the person sitting next to you on the subway could be hungry. They just have enough to get on, to go work that minimum wage job, and they're struggling. And so it's all around us, and yet most of us don't see it. And I want to get your thoughts on that concept. Would you agree?
Yes, hunger in plain sight, yet visible to so many, right? And as you said, the person on the subway, the child in school and their peer, a child in school don't have, or is hungry, don't have enough food, whereas someone else has. And no one knows. The teacher sometimes cannot recognize or distinctly realize that this child is hungry and this is why he or she's not learning. These are issues that are not being dealt with. I mean, we've come a long way. We're much better than we were, but nevertheless, it's still here and it's escalating. It's growing exponentially. The resources have dwindled down tremendously, right? You would think at this point, with all the riches of the American system, we would not have this issue. But it's facing us. It's a sad thing, but it's right here. You see, hunger has grown in such a way that it just seems normal. And that's the problem we're having. A lot of the politicians or those that are lawmakers or decision makers, it just seems to them like it's just usual. It's just a normal thing, which it's not. It is not. It is not normal for someone to be hungry.
Okay, now number 36, sir.
In the United States, more than 40 million Americans lack access to affordable, nutritious food.
Maybe fruit I didn't take.
Black households are 3 times more likely to face food insecurity than white households. It's interesting, as a kid, Lyndon Baines Johnson had the war on poverty and talk about the Great Society. And in China, there's been an effort to eradicate poverty. But here in the United States, it doesn't seem like you hear politicians saying, look, we've got to target poverty. We've got to target hunger. How is it that, and you mentioned it, I mean, this is a country has so many resources and so many riches. How is it that that's not a front and center issue in your mind? Because it is for you.
It is. Poverty, you have to look at we talk about the racial system in our community. Racism is hunger, right? We put a Band-Aid on the situation and believe that that's it. And like I said earlier, billions of dollars, right, have been thrown to this thing, but just as a Band-Aid, not to get into the root cause. And what is the root cause? We look at lack of housing discrimination. We look at policing, the violence, the gun violence. We look at healthcare. These are some of the reasons, right? Poverty, as it is. You're living in a neighborhood, and it's so sad that I'm living beside a supermarket that I can't shop at. What sense does that make? If I can't shop at the supermarket next to me, I have to find a way to get 6 blocks away or 10 blocks away to a supermarket that I can find something to eat. And what I get there is not even worth buying. That's what we're living in. And that's why I think that it's a Band-Aid. We continue to suppress individuals by how we feed them. And we're not looking at the fact that families really, everyone should be equal in the sight of, we say, God. Everyone should be equal, but it's not so. There's no equality here. In the Black and brown community, years ago, I used to fight about what comes to our doors. There were times when the food that came in was not worth giving out. Mainly sodas and crackers and sugary things and cakes that we should be happy about. And when we do see vegetables, it was only starchy vegetables, or maybe the lean meat was not worth giving out, right? I felt like they were dumping what they did not want on this community. And I had to fight for that. It took years, but now nobody carries soda here anymore. So that's a win-win for us.
The Campaign Against Hunger also runs urban farms where residents can pick up fresh produce and learn about gardening. Dr. Samuels, one of the things I want to ask is, listening to you,
Okay.
it's really daunting what you do, but it has to be rewarding too. I mean, are there stories or episodes that keep you going each day?
Yeah, right now we're actually walking towards our Saratoga farm. That's a big reward. It took me years of fighting and advocating, And finally, we were able to get it along with Eagle Academy. We work with the school across the street to ensure that the kids get fresh fruits and vegetables. So there's a good thing about here because many families come right here to buy their produce, but not only that, this is like an educational center for us. It is beautiful. Come on, follow me. Let's go on.
Okay.
And see what it's like.
I'll follow you.
There are thousands of seeds here because we have what started as a 2,000 square feet. Now we have 2.5 acres of land, and this is the feeding station for it. Every seed here will be planted, and we are hoping to gain at least 30,000 pounds of food.
And from the start, when you first got into this line of work, you know, like you said, there were all these items that were going to these families that they just didn't need. They have health issues. And you look at this, I mean, this is nothing but leafy green. This is all healthy stuff. It's got to be really rewarding for you.
It is. It is one of my favorite places, to be honest with you. There's a fig tree that will grow up in the summer months that will get some beautiful tasty fig. So it's great. You can actually come in here and have lunch. In other words, just pick and eat because everything is naturally grown.
More than 17% of the U.S. population lives in a food desert. Low-income areas where access to affordable and healthy food is limited, with the nearest supermarket more than 10 miles away. If you had a magic wand and you could go and talk to the people in Washington, D.C. who decide on policy, I mean, what would be kind of on your checklist to recommend, in terms of changes?
Living wage is important, right? Because families struggle. Poverty is because of so many issues. We know that, and we talked somewhat about that. But if I was in a position to sign something or wave that magic wand, what I would like to do is to have more of the politicians to come into their neighborhoods, not into their offices, and to actually walk the streets and speak to the individuals. And I'll tell you what they'll hear. They will hear that individuals want to work but can't get a job. They will hear that they have a job but don't have enough because of the cost of living, right? They'll hear also about gun violence in their community. They'll also hear that there is no access to healthy food. No matter where you go, you have to go too far, as I mentioned before. And how do we change that? By building infrastructure, bringing in companies and jobs inside the community to make sure individuals have access. When a bank won't come into your community, that says a lot. When a supermarket refuses to come into a community, again, businesses are not here. We need to invest in the infrastructure, not because of who lives there, but because there are individuals living there. I'm a migrant. And I say to someone recently, I had no idea about segregation until I came to this country. Everyone was equal, right? I had no idea there was such a thing until I walked here and realized that the color of your skin matters. Strange enough, but it does.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been really quite an experience chatting with you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.